Imagine driving down a frozen stretch of a highway in the middle of nowhere. Snow whispering against your windshield, headlights slicing through fog, and realizing you haven't seen another soul for hours. Then, something moves on the shoulder. That's what tonight's stories are about. Real people who vanished, froze, or found something on Alaska's highways that should never have been there. Before we start, hit that like button. It helps this story reach more horror fans like you. And drop a comment below, telling me where you're watching from. Every viewer is part of my Creepy Souls family, and I want to know where my family's tuning in from tonight. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Your subscribe gives huge support to this channel and keeps us bringing you more true, terrifying stories from the coldest roads on Earth. I've been running snowplows up near Coldfoot for over a decade now. Most guys can't hack the hours, the dark, or the isolation. But I liked it. The steady hum of the truck, the clean scrape of blade over ice, the long stretch of silence between radio check-ins. That night, I was working the Dalton Highway, between mile 180 and the Yukon River crossing. Just me, the plow, and miles of wind-scoured white. Visibility was low, the kind of cold that numbs the steering wheel and rattles inside your teeth. It was just past 2 a.m. when I first saw it. A shape, slouched, unmoving, just off the shoulder where the snowbank curved. I only caught a glimpse through the blur of flurries, but it looked like someone hunched over, head low, too dark to make out details. I slowed, instinct kicking in. Could be a hiker caught out, or some poor trucker stranded on foot. But by the time I edged past, the spot was empty. Just a sag in the snow like something had been there, then wasn't. Didn't think too much of it at first. The eyes play tricks out here. Especially when you've been staring into high beams and blowing snow for 6 hours straight. But then, 20 minutes later, I saw it again. Same side of the road, same slouched figure. A little farther ahead, not moving, not signaling, just there. I hit the brakes harder this time. Window down, head poked out, nothing. Snow swirling in the headlight beams like static. I backed up, scanned the shoulder with my work light, fresh powder, no footprints. I chalked it up to fatigue. Ate a protein bar, cranked the defrost, turned up the radio even though it was just static. But I couldn't shake it, and that shape, that stillness. Another 40 minutes passed. I was nearing the remote stretch past Beaver Slide when I saw it a third time. Closer this time and more clear. Pale shoulders hunched forward. No coat, arms dangling. Head tilted toward the trees. I stopped, hard. This time I got out. Boots hit snow with a crunch. Wind cut right through my jacket. The cold bit deep, but I followed the spot where I'd seen it. Nothing, no figure, no footprints. But then I noticed something in the powder behind my truck. Footprints, barefoot, small, just the toes and heel, lightly pressed into the snow, like someone was walking slow. Deliberate. But they weren't coming from the road. They were heading into the trees. No coat, no shoes, just prints. Disappearing between the black lines of spruce. I should have called it in. Radio dispatch, something. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching those prints fade into the dark. Listening. And in that long, bitter silence, I realized something else. I wasn't hearing anything at all. No wind, no engine hum, no branches creaking. Just my own breath. Like the whole forest was holding still, waiting. I kept driving, didn't sleep when I got back to the station at dawn. Just sat in the locker room staring at the floor until Hank asked if I was sick. I didn't tell him what I saw. Didn't seem like the kind of thing you talk about without sounding like your brain's coming apart. The next night, I was assigned the same route. same shift. I told myself I'd imagined it. The prints, the figure. The mind can spin things when it's too quiet, too cold, but deep down I knew it hadn't been in my head. At midnight, I hit the stretch where I'd stopped the night before. Nothing at first, but then, as I rounded the bend near mile marker 194, I saw them again. Not the figure this time. The prints. Same size, same pattern, same bare feet, only this time. They weren't in front of me. They were behind the truck. I stopped, left the engine running, climbed down, flashlight in hand. The snow was fresh. Only a dusting. But there they were, a line of prints starting 10 feet behind the plow, walking slowly down the center of the road. Not running, not staggering, just walking. As if whoever it was had stepped out of the woods after I passed and started following me. My headlamp caught each one, clear indentations, the arch of the foot, the spread of toes, still barefoot, still no sign of clothing or tire tracks, no other prints near them. I looked into the woods again, scanned every tree trunk, listened for movement. Nothing, just stillness. When I turned back toward the truck, I saw something else. On the plow blade, drawn through the frost, was a single handprint. Small. Too small to be a man's. Fingers spread wide, like it had been pressed there slowly. I don't remember getting back in the cab. Just remember my heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear the engine. I drove the rest of the shift without stopping once. Kept the lights on high, eyes darting from mirror to mirror. The prints were gone by morning. Snow buried them by then. I checked the dash cam footage the next day. Nothing. Just white snow, black trees, static. I didn't tell anyone, didn't want to be pulled off the road. Or worse, benched for evaluation. But since then, I've kept seeing them, not every night, but enough. Sometimes it's just the shape ahead, vanishing when I get too close. Sometimes it's the prints, behind the truck, always barefoot, always headed toward me, and once, last week, I swear I heard breathing just outside the cab window, low, ragged, like someone half frozen, trying to stay awake. But I never saw a face, never once. I still run that highway, still plow through snow in silence. But now, every time I glance in the mirror, I don't just check for traffic. I check for footprints. Because some part of me believes, whatever I saw out there, it remembers me too. We'd been on the road nearly 8 hours when we saw the lights. My wife, Erin, was asleep with her hood drawn up, her legs tucked beneath a blanket, the kind she always carried on long trips. I was gripping the wheel a little too hard, trying to keep the trailer straight on the slick mountain road. Snow had started falling somewhere near the Tennessee border, and by the time we climbed toward the high ridges past Black Hollow, it was thick and steady. I didn't want to stop. We were trying to make it through the Appalachian Pass before the deeper freeze hit, but my eyes were going. I'd blink and see flashes, colors, the kind of tired that sneaks up on you. So when the yellow lights cut through the fog, it felt like relief. A state rest stop, plain sign, no logo, no cameras, just a small loop off the road, the kind they built in the 70s. The building sat low and squat, half sunk into the hill. One flickering bulb buzzed over the entrance, casting just enough light to show the old brown siding, the red salt bins pushed against the wall, and the dark outline of a pickup parked on the far end, half covered in snow. I woke Erin. She mumbled something, then sat up. "Where are we?" "Just outside Talk," I said. "Rest, stop, gonna stretch, use the bathroom." She followed me out of the truck, boots crunching in the snow. The air had that still, pressing quiet, the kind that settles in hollows before a deeper storm. I smelled pine sap, old cigarette smoke, and something faintly chemical like stale cleaning fluid left open too long. The building's front door creaked when I pushed it. Inside was warmer than I expected. Old wood paneling lined the walls, and a vending machine hummed near the back, mostly empty. A map of the state hung crooked on one side. A corkboard with long-faded posters curled at the corners, missing persons, truck weight limits, seasonal fire warnings. Erin disappeared into the women's room while I topped off our thermos with weak coffee from the dispenser. It was lukewarm, but smelled fine. That's when I noticed him. A man in coveralls pushing a wide broom along the far wall. Middle-aged, gray beard, one ear bent like it had been frostbitten at some point. He nodded at me when I looked his way, didn't say much. Just kept sweeping the same stretch over and over. "Coffee's still working," I said, trying to be friendly. He glanced at the pot. "Tends to," he said. "Pipe hasn't frozen yet." He didn't smile, but he didn't seem unfriendly either, just distracted or tired. Erin came out, zipped her coat higher. She gave him a polite nod. "Thanks for keeping it clean." He just went back to sweeping. We left a minute later. I didn't see the man's truck, but I figured it must have been parked out back. As we pulled away, I looked in the rear view. The lights were still on. The man still sweeping, just under that flickering bulb. We found a pull-off about 20 miles, south, and parked for the night. Woke up early, our windows rimmed with frost. I stepped out to shake off the cold, stretch my legs. Erin was fiddling with the stove in the trailer, making oatmeal and trying to get the heat going. While she worked, I pulled out my phone and checked the weather warnings. A winter advisory was up for the region. Temps were dropping fast. Then I saw the headline. Small, local. Historic rest stop fire, still no funding for cleanup. My stomach dropped. The photo was blurry, taken at night, but I recognized the building. Same low-slung shape, same salt bins, same road curve in the background. The caption said it burned last December. An electrical fault in the wiring. Whole thing went up in under an hour, no survivors, except the article mentioned someone, a janitor. Russell M. Dunley, 61, found curled near the vending machine. Died of smoke inhalation. His truck had frozen over in the lot and wasn't found until 3 days later. I read it again, the same spot we'd parked at, the same vending machine, the same broom. I closed the phone. Didn't say anything to Erin right away. I just told her to pack quick, that we needed to keep moving ahead of the weather. She didn't argue, but all day I couldn't shake it. Not just the building, the heat I'd felt inside, the working lights, the coffee, that man, the way he kept sweeping the same spot, like it mattered more than anything else. I didn't believe in ghosts. Still don't. But I called the local highway patrol anyway, told them what I saw. They paused when I gave them the location. Then the officer asked again, careful this time. "Sir, you're saying the lights were on?" "Yes." "And the building was intact?" "Yes." There was silence on the line. "I don't know what to tell you," he said finally. "That place has been closed over a year. You sure it wasn't another stop?" I didn't answer, because I was sure. Later that night, I opened the thermos we'd filled. The coffee inside was still warm, but when I poured it into the sink, it smelled like burned wood and ash. I don't talk about it much. Not because I'm scared, but because I still don't understand. I've driven past that same stretch twice since. Both times I looked for the lights, for the building. There's nothing left. Just a blackened foundation and a posted sign half buried in snow. But sometimes, when it's late and quiet, I think about the man sweeping. His calm, methodical rhythm. like he was doing it because that's what he always did. Like the fire hadn't stopped him. Or maybe he just never left. I've been driving rigs for over 20 years now. Long haul mostly, produce, insulation, steel, whatever fits the load. I've run everything from I-40 through Tennessee to back roads in West Virginia, so thin they barely count as pavement. But it was my second winter working the route from Fairbanks down through the Richardson Highway that made me question a few things I used to feel sure about. It was a cold run, January. I was hauling pipe sections southbound, just outside a forgotten stretch near Paxson, close to where the land folds in on itself and the trees thin out into vast fields of snow and silence. There are long patches of that road where you don't see another set of headlights for hours. That's where it started. The CB crackled. Not the usual trucker banter or weather updates, just fragments. I wasn't even sure the unit was turned on at first. The voice came in soft, like a whisper trying to crawl through static. Turn, around. That's all I caught. Then nothing, just static. I reached for the knob out of instinct, adjusted the squelch, but the screen was blank, dead. I flicked the power, nothing. At the next pull-off, I radioed dispatch through the SATCOM, mostly to check in, partly to get my head on straight. I told them I was hearing something on the CB, probably bleed over from a ham rig or interference off the mountains. They checked their end. Your CB's not transmitting, Dale? It's been off the whole trip. I told myself maybe the signal came from outside, some lost broadcast bouncing off ice or ridgeline. Cold can do weird things to airwaves. The next few hours were uneventful. Just me, the road, the hum of the tires, and the occasional jolt from a frost heave. I was somewhere near the Isabel Pass when it came back. This time, it wasn't just words. I heard numbers, like someone calling out a code. Foxtrot 193, then a pause, followed by what sounded like breathing. Labored, strained. The kind of sound a person makes when they're trying not to make sound. I turned the volume up, still nothing on the screen, still no power light. I pulled into a turnout near a snow-logged service shack to check the unit physically. The plug, the CB power, was hanging loose under the dash, fully unplugged. I hadn't touched it. Not since Coldfoot. That's when I noticed something else. The snow on the passenger side floor was melting, like someone had stepped in hours ago and the heater just now caught up. I stared at it for a long time, just wet carpet. No tracks, no scent, no reason. But I kept staring. I should have called it in again. Reported the interference, asked for a reroute. But I didn't. I just kept going, mile by mile, south into the narrowing valleys. Sometimes the CB would stay silent for hours. Then it'd flicker to life with fragments. Once, it sounded like crying. Another time, like someone muttering numbers backwards. I didn't sleep much the next stopover. My hands kept going back to the unit, checking the plug, the switch, the wire. Still off, still dead, still whispering. The voice returned just after 2 a.m. on a descent between two ridges near Summit Lake. The snow had thickened into white sheets. I was crawling at 30 mph when it came through again. Faint but clear, like someone right behind my seat. Turn around, please. That please is what did it. Not desperate, not angry, just tired. Tired and resigned. I pulled over on instinct, killed the engine, sat in the dark with just the wind ticking against the mirrors and the soft ping of cooling metal. I reached down and finally yanked the CB free, held the plug in one hand, the wire in the other. No power, no connection, no way that voice should have been there. But the whisper continued, faint, garbled, still somehow coming from the speaker. My hands were shaking. I stepped out into the snow, boots sinking into the soft ridge of the shoulder. The wind carried that low howl it gets between the ridge lines, like something alive breathing through the pine. In the quiet, I could feel how far away I was from everything. No homes, no stations, just my rig, the mountains, and a CB radio that was never plugged in. And for the first time in years, I felt watched. Not by someone angry or violent, but by something forgotten. Like the road itself had memory. I got back in, didn't restart the truck right away. Instead, I traced the sound. Pressed my ear to the speaker grill. Nothing. But behind the seat, wedged down between the emergency blanket and the jack, was a second mic. One I didn't install. Old style, dusty, cracked wire. I never found out who it belonged to. I asked dispatch if this rig had been reassigned. Maybe a trooper used it before me. They said no. It had been parked in the yard for months. No logs, no entries. I threw the mic out at the next stop. Left it at a diner near Glenallen. But sometimes I still hear it. Faint. When the road goes quiet and the trees press close and the snow falls too soft to make sound. A whisper under the static. Not angry, just lost. And still asking me to turn around. I've been doing contract delivery runs through the Appalachian stretch of the Richardson Highway for years. Solo routes mostly. It's not glamorous, but it's quiet. I like quiet. That trip started like any other. Early morning pickup in Knoxville. A loaded van headed north into the ridges near Glenallen. I'd taken this route enough to know where the pavement crumbled, where the turns were too sharp, where the fog clung to the trees like a second skin. The weather was already turning bad by the time I crossed into the holler near Red Oak Gap. A slow, silent snow started falling, the kind that doesn't make a sound, doesn't bounce off the windshield, just accumulates, slow and heavy. Fog rolled in with it. That dense mountain fog that eats your headlights and makes the trees feel like they're closing in. The heater in the van was barely working. I'd scraped the inside of the windshield twice already. My breath fogged the glass between wiper passes, and I kept cracking the window just to stay alert. It was around mile marker 112 when I saw her. She was standing right in the middle of the road, a small figure in a red parka, just beyond the next bend. Not walking, not flinching, just still. I yanked the wheel hard. The van jerked sideways, tires skidding across packed snow, gravel spitting underneath. I didn't hit her, I'm sure of that, but by the time I came to a stop, she was gone. No footsteps, no drag marks, just my tire tracks and the wet hiss of snow hitting the roof. I sat there a while, staring at the empty road in my mirrors, engine rumbling low. The fog hadn't lifted, but I could still make out the shoulder, the tree line, the faint glint of guardrail, nothing else. She should have been there. I got out, boots crunching in the slush, breath frosting in front of me. Walked maybe 30 feet back, scanning the ditches on either side. No blood, no flash of red in the trees. Just snow, bare branches, and that silence you only get deep in the hollows, like the world's holding its breath. I was about to head back to the van when I heard it. A soft tap-tap from behind me. Not loud, not urgent, just persistent. I turned fast, heart hammering, but there was nothing, no movement, no sound. Just the van idling in the road, driver's side door open. And in the time it took to walk back, maybe a minute, the windows had fogged up completely. The whole interior glazed in frost, thickest near the back. I climbed back in, slammed the heat to high, then I saw them. On the inside of the rear window, just behind the passenger seat, were prints. Small handprints pressed into the frost from inside the van. 5 fingers, smudged, clear as day, 2 of them, about the size of a child's. I stared so long I forgot to breathe. Then I wiped them away. That's what scared me most, how easily they vanished, like they'd never been there at all. I kept driving, didn't stop again for hours, didn't call anyone. Didn't think much beyond keeping the wheels on the road. By the time I reached the drop point outside Winchester, the snow had picked up again. Visibility was down to maybe 50 feet. I dropped the load, signed off, and got back in the van. Didn't even go inside. The air still felt wrong, like something was too close. I parked that night in a motel just off the mountain road, one of those aging two-story places with buzzing fluorescent lights and cigarette burns in the bedding. I tried not to think about it. Told myself it was stress, fatigue. Roads like that can play tricks on your head. But then I saw the inside of the van the next morning. Frost had returned. Not just on the windows, on the inside of the windshield, the dashboard, even the seats. Like the cold had crept in from somewhere deeper than just bad insulation. And on the back window, faint but still there, were the same handprints. Smaller this time, lower. I opened the doors, checked under the seats, tore through the cargo space. Nothing. No sign anyone had been inside. Everything was locked. Everything as it should have been, except it wasn't. For weeks after, I'd find little things. Sometimes, when I'd stop to refuel, the passenger seatbelt would be buckled when I knew I hadn't touched it. Sometimes, I'd hear soft movement in the back at night, like shifting weight. Breathing, maybe. But the worst part? The smell. Wet fabric, old dirt. Something like the inside of a snow boot left out too long. And always, that faint trace of something sweet. Like bubble gum, or a candy wrapper crushed under a seat. I took the van in to be detailed eventually. Told them I thought maybe rodents had gotten in. The guy looked at me strange when I mentioned the smell. "You said you've been running through Glen Ellen?" he asked. I nodded. He paused. "You ever hear about that stretch near Red Oak Gap? About the little girl hitting a red coat back in '92? I didn't answer, just handed him the keys. That van's gone now. Traded it in 2 months later. I've never driven through that stretch again. But every winter when the snow starts falling and the air gets still, I sometimes wake up remembering the feel of the steering wheel under my palms, the wet chill in the van. And in my mind, I see the handprints again, just for a moment, appearing on the inside of the glass. Like she never left, just waited for someone else to notice. I've been running Taos through the Appalachian backroads long enough to know what loneliness sounds like. It's not silence. It's the hum of the truck engine, the crunch of gravel under tired boots, and that low wind that moves through the hollows like it's searching for something it lost. That night, I was on shift for Monroe's garage. We covered the ridge routes near Coldfoot, a scattered town tucked deep between the folds of the mountains. There's only one stretch of road that leads out past it, a rough, frost-bitten curve of asphalt that climbs toward the ridge and vanishes into miles of forest. Cell service out there's a joke, so most calls come through the landline. I was halfway through my thermos when the dispatcher radioed in. Said we had a vehicle stuck about 8 miles north of Coldfoot. Woman, mid-30s, sounded shaken but calm. Claimed her engine died but then started back up. Said she didn't feel right staying put. I logged it like any other call. Coordinates came through faint on the digital screen. Weather was dipping to single digits, wind blowing in off the ridge. I figured I'd be hauling someone who slid into a ditch. By the time I reached the stretch, it was close to midnight. The snow had eased up, but fog clung to the trees like wool. My headlights cut through just enough to show the outline of the car up ahead, a silver sedan sitting crooked on the shoulder. Driver's door open, engine running, headlights on. At first, I thought maybe the driver had gone looking for signal. I parked behind it, left my hazards blinking, and stepped out. The cold hit like a slap, wet, metallic air that burned the lungs. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. The car was still warm. Heater blasting full, dashboard light steady. Purse in the passenger seat. A travel mug still steaming in the cup holder. Cell phone on the console. Screen cracked, but lit up with the red battery symbol. No footprints leading away. Just mine. The only sound was the idle of the car, a dull, uneven hum that made the mirrors rattle. I radioed dispatch to confirm I'd found the vehicle, but the line broke into static halfway through. I tried again. Nothing but white noise and faint breathing, though it might have just been my own, echoing through the headset. I turned the engine off, pocketed the keys, and checked the glove box for registration. The name didn't match the one from dispatch. That was the first thing that didn't sit right. The second came 10 minutes later, when I got back in my truck and saw that my dash clock had jumped forward an hour. I hadn't noticed losing time, but the tow log said 12:08 a.m. and the car's dash said 1:09. And in the side mirror, I thought I saw movement, just the shape of someone standing a few yards off the road. Too far to make out, but close enough that I caught myself locking the doors. By the time I stepped out with the flashlight, there was nothing. Just fog and snow and that long stretch of road disappearing into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I logged the car, dropped it at Monroe's, and drove home before dawn. When I called dispatch the next morning to file the report, the woman on the line paused. "We didn't send you on any call last night," she said. I thought she was joking, but she read the log back. No record of my run, no coordinates entered, no recorded caller. I told her the plate number, the make, even the purse I'd seen. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, carefully, "We don't cover that stretch after dark anymore." Apparently, the company had stopped taking calls from the Coldfoot Ridge after a tow operator went missing there 5 years back. Same road, same spot. They never found him, just his truck, engine idling, door open, heat running. I drove back out that afternoon, against better judgment. The snow had filled in the tracks from the night before, but I still recognized the shoulder. Same curve, same ridge. The space where the car had been was empty now, but when I stepped out, I noticed something half buried in the slush. A cell phone, cracked like the one I'd seen screen dark. When I picked it up, it was warm. Back at the garage, I tried to shake it off, told myself it was a relay error, some ghost in the system. I've been around radios long enough to know static can sound like breathing, like words if you listen too hard. Still, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way the car's heater blasted against my face, how recent everything had felt. The warmth in the mug, the faint trace of perfume still hanging in the air. Later that week, Monroe called me into his office. He was pale, eyes sunken. Said a trooper had come by looking for me. Apparently, there'd been another vehicle found near that same ridge 2 nights later. Same details, running car, empty road, and when they checked the logs for my tow truck's GPS, it showed I'd never gone there at all. The truck's tracker had been offline between 11:47 p.m. and 1:11 a.m. Exactly the same gap between my dash clock and the sedans. I stopped taking night calls after that. I still hear the radio sometimes when I drive home late, a faint voice crackling through the static just below the hum of the engine. Always the same line. Not desperate, just clear. Tow request, north of Coldfoot. And every time I check the screen, it's always blank, like the call was never there at all. I wasn't even supposed to be out there that day. I was helping out a buddy, Joe, who'd gotten called off shift last minute. He worked with county road services, and we shared coverage on the old mountain routes, mostly plowing in winter, sometimes checking for abandoned vehicles or blocked passes when the weather turned. It had snowed hard the last 2 days, real whiteout conditions, the kind that seals off hollows and clogs the old forest roads in silence. Locals near Boone Gap said nobody had gone past the Manly Hot Springs turnoff since the storm started. That area, tucked deep in the folds of the range, always felt older, forgotten. There's a feeling up there, like the mountain listens. So when dispatch said 3 vehicles had been spotted near that turnoff, lights blinking but no movement, I volunteered to check it. I figured maybe someone had gotten stuck, or it was some kind of carpool that broke down. But 3, I reached the stretch by mid-afternoon. Gray light, sky like wet paper. No wind, just the muffled hush that snow brings. The road narrowed as I climbed, tires crunching slush until the forest crowded in again. Pines leaned in on either side. And then I saw them. 3 vehicles. 2 sedans and a small pickup. All lined up neatly just off the shoulder, nose pointed toward the tree line. Hazard lights blinking in slow unison. No signs of a skid or slide. No fresh tracks leading in or out. Just the crusted-over ridges of snow packed tight around each tire. I parked behind them and stepped out. The silence hit first. No bird calls, no dripping melt from branches, no wind. Just the faint electric tick of blinkers in the cold. It felt like walking into a paused moment, like time had pressed a thumb against this stretch of road and stopped it breathing. All the doors were shut. Windows rolled up. The snow on the hoods hadn't been disturbed, no handprints, no smudges. It hadn't snowed in over 12 hours, and the blinkers still pulsed, which meant the batteries weren't dead. But the engines were cold, stone cold. I checked the first car, a blue Corolla, empty, glove box open, registration inside, cup of coffee in the center console, frozen solid. Second one, a green Ford, still locked. I cupped my hands to the glass. Nothing on the seats. Back seat had a toddler's car seat. No footprints around it, no signs of struggle. But the third one, the pickup, was what made me stop. The driver's door was unlocked. I opened it slowly, expecting the dome light. Nothing. The interior smelled faintly of grease and coffee. There was a half-eaten sandwich on the passenger seat. Not moldy, just warm. Not hot, not steaming, but definitely not cold. And that didn't make any sense. The air in the cab was freezing. The seat vinyl had stiffened from the temperature. But the sandwich, it felt like it had been bitten into less than 10 minutes ago. I stepped back and looked around. No footprints in the snow, not a single one. Not leading away, not circling back. Just unbroken white, soft and silent, all the way to the tree line. I stood there, blinking at those hazard lights, and suddenly the world felt too still. I tried my radio, but it buzzed with static. My phone had 1 bar, just enough to snap a photo of the dashboard clock in that truck. 3:42 p.m., same time as my watch. But when I turned to head back to my own vehicle, I caught a movement. Not in the trees, but in the rearview mirror of the pickup. Just a blur, faint, behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there. Just the empty road and those 3 vehicles, hazard lights blinking like a heartbeat. I didn't stay long after that. I filed the report that evening, marked it abandoned vehicles, no occupants on scene. A towing crew was scheduled to go retrieve them the next day, weather permitting. But the next day, they were gone. All 3 vehicles. No tracks, no tow report, no record they'd even been logged except for mine. And that photo I'd taken of the dashboard clock. When I pulled it up, the timestamp still read 3:42 p.m., but the time on the dash in the photo? 2:19. I know what I saw. My watch, the radio clock, the sky, all said 3:42. But in that photo, frozen forever, the truck dash clearly read something else, and I didn't notice it until the next morning. I drove back out there 3 days later, on my own time. I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about that sandwich, the warmth of it, the silence around those cars, the way the hazards blinked in sync, like a rhythm. Too perfect, too intentional. The road looked different that day. Melted snow exposed the shoulder, revealing patches of dark, wet gravel. I parked roughly where I had before, stepped out, and looked around. Nothing remained. No stains, no broken glass, no battery drips in the snow. Except for one thing. Just off the tree line, barely visible behind some brush, was a small fold of paper. Half frozen, stuck in the crook of a root. I pulled it free. It was a page torn from a spiral notebook. Wet at the corners, smudged from time and frost. But the handwriting was still legible, uneven, hurried. 3 cars, no one left. I saw them walk in one by one, like they were following something. I stayed. I'm not going in. If this is found, please tell someone. Something calls out here, not with sound, with silence. No name, no date, just that. I folded the note and tucked it into my coat pocket. I didn't tell anyone, not my supervisor, not Joe, not even my wife. A week later, I took myself off the winter rotation. I stuck to paperwork and vehicle maintenance after that. I told them my back was acting up, which wasn't entirely a lie. Sometimes I drive past that turnoff on my way to Boone Gap. Just to see it, just to confirm it still looks the same, and it always does. Still, silent, harmless. But I won't stop there again. Because sometimes, when the weather is cold and still, I get the feeling something did follow me back. Not a person, not a thing. Just that silence, the kind that presses in from the trees and waits. I've been hauling freight through the Appalachians for close to 25 years now. There's a rhythm to these roads. Tight switchbacks, fog that clings like a wet rag, the scent of pine bark and diesel, the hum of tires rolling across cracked pavement. You get used to the isolation. Sometimes I go hours without seeing another set of headlights. Doesn't bother me, but there are stretches that feel different. Like something old still lingers in the dirt. The highway between Lewis Fork and Crossvale, particularly the miles past the old mile marker 210, is one of them. I was coming off a long run from Knoxville, pushing through sleet and patches of black ice just before dawn. February chill had set in hard, and the mountains were ghost white under a gray sky. My defroster was working overtime, and the radio had dropped to static somewhere near Dry Branch. No music, no CB chatter, just me and the road. I spotted him just past a bend where the tree line breaks for a short stretch of shoulder. Middle-aged guy in a high-vis vest, hard hat under one arm, flashlight in the other. He was standing by the median, flagging me down with slow, deliberate waves. Now, normally, I wouldn't stop for anyone, not in that weather and not alone. But he looked official, calm, like he belonged out there. I slowed and rolled the window down. "You all right?" I asked. He nodded once. "Need a lift to mile 210, not far." Something about the way he said it made me pause. Not, "Can you take me or I'm stranded?" Just that. Need a lift to mile 210. I unlocked the passenger door. He climbed in without a word, brushing snow from his vest. Smelled faintly of wet pine and road salt. We rode in silence for a while. I offered him coffee from my thermos. He shook his head politely. "You work out here?" I asked. He nodded. "Highway maintenance, long time ago." I glanced at him. His face was pale, but not sickly, more like someone who hadn't been outside in years. His hands rested calmly in his lap, fingers stiff. No gloves, no radio. His badge was scratched, the logo barely visible. As we approached the incline past Black Hollow, the snow thickened. Flurries danced in the beams of my headlights. The road was slick, untouched. No tire tracks ahead of us. No signs of plows. When we rounded the bend, I saw the rusted green sign ahead, mile 210. The marker was half buried in a drift, barely legible. "This is it," the man said. I slowed, tires crunching into the snowy shoulder. He reached for the door, then paused and looked out toward the trees. "I died right here in 97, he said softly. Then he stepped out. The door shut gently behind him. No slam, no gust of wind. I sat there, hand still on the shifter, trying to process what I'd just heard. I looked in the side mirror. Nothing. No footprints. No sign he'd walked off the shoulder. Just the long trail of my tire tracks cutting clean through fresh snow. I got out, boots sinking a few inches. No prints, not a single one. Just the hiss of falling snow and the muffled hum of the idling engine behind me. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. What was I supposed to say? That I picked up a man in a vest who said he died 28 years ago, then disappeared into the snow. I kept driving, made it to my drop point in Virginia, and turned back the next day. Tried to reason it away. Exhaustion, a hallucination, stress. Maybe I dreamed part of it, or he'd wandered off faster than I thought. But I couldn't shake the image of his seat, dry, untouched, like no one had sat there at all. Still, I needed to know. A week later, I drove the same route again, empty trailer this time. When I reached mile marker 210, I pulled over. Daylight didn't help. The sky was bright but colorless. The snow had melted some, exposing patches of dead grass and broken shoulder gravel. I walked the length of the curve where he'd gotten out. And I found something. About 20 feet into the tree line, hidden beneath a fallen log, was an old roadside cross. Weathered wood, splintered, barely upright. A rusted maintenance vest was tangled around its base, half buried in leaves and dirt. No flowers, no plaque. Just faint Sharpie ink still visible under the grime. Thomas H.R. Feb 2, 1997. I felt a drop in my chest. Not fear exactly, not grief either, just a kind of hollow recognition, like something had quietly been waiting for me to see it. Later that week, I stopped by the county records office near Crossvale. The woman behind the desk looked up the name. It didn't take long. Thomas Rayburn, age 41. Died on duty during a snowstorm in 97. Maintenance worker. Suffered a head injury when his truck slid off the shoulder and overturned near, mile marker 210. The report noted, low visibility, no witnesses. He was found the next morning by a passing plow. The funeral was local. No surviving family listed. The part that stuck with me, the last line of the incident report. Likely time of death estimated between 4 and 4:30 a.m. Exact hour unknown. That's when I'd seen him. Right between 4:10 and 4:15 a.m. on my clock. That was almost 2 weeks ago, and I still see him sometimes. Not on the road, not in mirrors or shadows, just in my mind. The way he looked sitting there. Calm, composed, like someone who'd accepted something I hadn't. Sometimes, when I'm parked for the night and the snow starts falling, I swear I hear the soft thunk of a door shutting. Not mine, just outside. And every time I pass mile marker 210 now, I slow down. Not to look for him, but to remind myself. Some moments out here, they don't end when they're supposed to. They just keep waiting. It was supposed to be just a weekend drive. My girlfriend, Dana, had been begging to get out of town for months. Too much time boxed up in our apartment outside Knoxville. Too many hours behind a screen. So I mapped a route through the mountains, looped through some old mining towns and planned to crash at a cabin near Portage Creek before heading back. We'd taken the longer way, up through the hollows past Dawson Ridge, down through the valleys toward Whittier. Cold air crept in with the evening. Fog rolled low over the asphalt like it was crawling toward something. By the time we reached the entrance to the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, it was already full dark. I'd only read about it once. A single-lane tunnel carved through a mountain, used by both cars and trains on alternating schedules. 13,000 feet long. No shoulders, no exits. Just a narrow pipe of concrete and light running straight through rock. Dana didn't like the idea of it, but the GPS said it was the quickest way to the cabin, and the next open cycle was in 4 minutes. We waited at the red light while an old pickup passed from the other side. When the tunnel emptied, the signal turned green. I eased forward, headlights bouncing off rough concrete walls. There was no radio signal inside, no GPS, just the sound of tires on pavement and the low hum of ventilation fans echoing through the dark. Dana was quiet, staring out the passenger window. I kept both hands on the wheel. At some point, I glanced at the dashboard clock. 9:17 p.m. That's when I saw the headlights in the mirror. Faint but steady. 2 white beams, swaying slightly like a car following at a distance. I hadn't seen anyone else waiting at the signal before us, but maybe someone had squeezed in late. Did anyone come in behind us? I asked. Dana turned. I don't think so. The lights kept pace behind us for another minute. Maybe 2. But the strange part was, they never seemed to get closer. No movement, no flicker from brights or turn signals. Just a steady glow, way too far back for the tight quarters of the tunnel. Then the beams swerved. One light dipped lower, as if the car behind had suddenly tilted or veered, and then gone. Total darkness. I eased off the gas. What happened? Dana asked, voice tight. I don't know. I kept glancing in the mirror. Nothing. Just blackness stretching behind us as if the tunnel had swallowed the car whole. But then, the lights came back. Only this time they weren't distant. They were right behind us, barely a car length away. No engine sound, no tire noise, just those 2 bright beams filling the mirrors, burning into the cab. Dana gasped and twisted to look. That wasn't there before. I know. I didn't brake, didn't signal. I just gripped the wheel and focused on the pinhole of yellow light at the far end of the tunnel, the exit. When we finally burst out into cold mountain air, I pulled off just past the gates and hopped out. There was nothing behind us, no car, no lights, no sound. Just the wide mouth of the tunnel, empty and silent. Dana stayed in the truck, too stunned to speak. I walked back toward the entrance until I could see the operator booth. An older man in a brown jacket leaned out. "You folks all right?" he called. "Was there anyone else in the tunnel behind us?" He blinked. "No, sir. You were the last ones through on this cycle." I opened my mouth, closed it again, and walked back to the truck. The headlights were still burned into my vision. We made it to the cabin an hour later. Dana didn't speak the entire ride, just stared out the window, arms crossed. The place was tucked into the hillside, one of those prefab log cabins with warped floorboards and a faint smell of mildew. The wood stove hadn't been used in weeks, and every creak of the walls felt amplified by the silence. We didn't talk about the tunnel at first. Just unpacked, made tea, and tried to let the heat fill the space. But sometime past midnight, I woke up to find Dana sitting by the front window. "You hear something?" I asked. She didn't answer for a while. Then, "The lights weren't real." I sat beside her. "You mean, like a reflection?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I mean I looked back, through the rear window. There was nothing there, but the mirrors, they still showed them. We sat there for a long time. The only sound was the wind pressing against the roof and the faint crackle of melting frost sliding off the eaves. The next morning, I drove back to the tunnel. I don't even know why. Something about it didn't sit right. I needed to stand in front of it again just to confirm I wasn't going crazy. The operator was different this time, a younger guy reading a paperback. I told him what happened. Not the lights exactly. Just asked if anything strange had ever happened in the tunnel. He looked up slowly. Defined strange. Like lights showing up when nobody's inside, or cars that don't appear on record. His brow furrowed, and he set the book down. There's been a few odd reports over the years, he said. Couple folks claiming to see lights. Some say they hear tires but never see a car. Always at night. Always when it's quiet out. Anything ever come of it? He shrugged. We run inspections weekly. Cameras show nothing. That was it. I didn't ask more. Didn't tell Dana. We drove home the next day, but since then, something's been bothering me. It's in the mirrors. Every now and then when I drive at night, especially through tight curves or tunnels, I'll catch it, just for a second. Twin headlights behind me, too far to be real, too close to ignore. I blink, and they're gone. And every time I pass a tunnel entrance now, especially ones deep in the mountains, I check the rear view before I enter, not for what's behind me, but for what might follow. I came to the mountains looking for solitude, thought it might help me feel normal again. My name's Hannah Kane. I'm a wildlife biologist, was anyway. After what happened last season up in the Wrangles, I took a sabbatical and headed east. Far from the cold, far from snow, far from open white spaces where silence pressed in like weight. I booked a remote research cabin in the southern stretch of the Appalachians, a few miles outside a forgotten town called Bailey's Rest. It sat quiet in a narrow hollow, wedged between two ridgelines, the kind of place that didn't show up on most maps unless you zoomed all the way in. The locals had said it was used by forestry rangers back in the 70s, then abandoned, reclaimed by moss and mud. I figured the isolation might clear my head. No reception, no radio, just me, some game cameras, and the winding tracks of deer and fox I'd traced through the wet woods. The drive up was like being swallowed. Trees leaned over the road like they were listening. Mist hung heavy, pale and shifting. Mud sprayed the undercarriage of my truck. By the time I reached the cabin, the sky had dimmed into a cold gray bruise. The structure itself was still standing, barely. Tin roof rusted and sloping. Windows fogged from inside. Porch sagging under its own weight. The air smelled like wet leaves and pine mold. Inside, 3 rooms, kitchenette, sleeping quarters, and a rear room stacked with firewood and broken shelving. It was cleaner than I expected. The floor was swept. A single cot had been laid out neatly against the far wall, as if someone had left just minutes before I arrived. I should have left then. Something about how the air sat inside the cabin, too still, like it was holding a breath. But I unpacked anyway. I set up my journal on the desk beside the window, slid my sat phone into its charging dock, and put on a kettle to boil. That first night, the silence was too quiet. No wind, no owls, not even the far-off crack of branches falling. Just the creak of the walls shifting against the cold and the steady drip from the eaves. I didn't sleep well. The next day, I did what I came for. Placed trail cams along a ravine near a half-frozen stream, looked for tracks, took notes. I didn't see much. No big mammals, no recent scat, no movement. But something was off with the snow line. On one trail, the top layer of snow had melted in a perfect oval. Clean. like something warm had stood there for hours. But no prints, not a single one. I took a photo, logged the coordinates, moved on. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up. The air inside the cabin felt wrong, heavy, like someone had been breathing beside me. The fire had burned low, the kettle on the stove ticked as it cooled. I sat up slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark. From my cot, I could see the front window, just beyond it, the porch. And someone was standing there, not moving, not swaying, just still. A shape darker than the dark, pressed up against the glass. I didn't scream, I don't think I even breathed. I just sat there, heart trying to claw its way through my chest, staring at that silhouette. And then it was gone. No footsteps, no crunch of wood, just gone. I stayed awake until sunrise. I wanted to believe I imagined it. But when I opened the door the next morning, the porch was dry. The frost had melted in a perfect circle where someone had stood. No boot prints, no smudges, just the dry, steamed wood. I checked the trail cams. One had gone dead. The other showed hours of still footage, until 2:57 a.m., when it cut to static. I called my team lead back in Juneau. No answer. Checked the satellite phone. It was dead. I pulled the battery out to check for corrosion. The battery casing had warped, melted, like it had been held against something hot. That afternoon, I packed up my field gear and made plans to hike out at first light. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The woods didn't feel empty anymore. That evening, I journaled everything: locations, times, weather, photos. And then I wrote one line I've never told anyone about until now. There's someone outside the cabin, not walking, just standing. The words felt stupid, even as I wrote them. But I knew what I saw, what I felt. I tried to convince myself it was a hunter, maybe a local, messing around, but I've studied wildlife for over a decade. I know when I'm being watched. And this wasn't curiosity. It felt like patience, like something waiting for me to come apart. That night, I locked every door, latched every window. I lit the stove and curled up in my sleeping bag with my headlamp on and my hunting knife tucked under my leg. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up cold. The stove was out. My headlamp battery had died. I reached for my journal instinctively, but it was gone from the nightstand. I scanned the room. Nothing had been touched. Nothing moved. But when I checked the front door, it was still locked, from the inside. I stepped onto the porch and looked at the railing. There it was again, a dry oval in the frost. Same shape, same size. I hiked out that morning without collecting my gear. Left the cams, the stove, the journal, didn't care. When the ranger station picked me up 3 miles down the forest road, they asked if I'd seen any signs of bears. I told them no. They said I looked pale. I've never gone back. But sometimes I think about that melted battery. About how heat doesn't work like that in snow unless something burning hot pressed against it. And I think about how quiet the cabin was. How still the porch had been. Like whatever stood there had no weight. Like it didn't need to move. Because it knew I would. I didn't know any of them personally. I'd only met their crew chief once. Jeremy Cole, a quiet guy with a crooked smile and a habit of writing everything down twice. They were part of a contracted survey outfit running wilderness topography north of Hickory Gap, maybe 5 miles off the Talk Cutoff. I worked with search and rescue out of Monroe County. When their daily check-in stopped, we figured it was weather or a busted radio. Happens more often than folks think. High ridgelines can choke out signal, and snowmelt makes a mess of gear. But by day 4 with no contact, we got sent in. Me and 2 others. Luther and Nate. Snowmobiles only took us so far. After that, it was boots and snowshoes. The forest out that way isn't marked. The trees grow in tight, dark bands. Fog clings low in the valleys like it's waiting for something. Even with GPS, we nearly missed the cabin. It was older than I expected, more of a ranger outpost from the 50s than a modern survey shack. Long and narrow, with a stovepipe chimney and planks warped from freeze-thaw cycles. No one greeted us. The windows were frosted over, but something felt watched. I knocked twice. Nothing. Inside, the air was stale, cold, not frozen, but just above it. Like the fire had died out recently. The wood stove still had coals. On the table, bowls of half-eaten food, canned chili, beans, forks still resting on tin plates. Their gear was still there, jackets hanging neatly, boots lined up near the door. Personal effects, shaving kits, thermoses, notebooks, all undisturbed. But no people. The back bedroom had 5 cots, all made. One had a journal sitting open. Red ink, rushed handwriting. I only caught a few words. Sounds at night. Not an animal. It's inside the tree line. In the kitchen, one of the maps had been pulled down and pinned to the table with a hunting knife. 5 red circles, drawn hard enough to tear the paper in places. No labels, no legend. And then there was the floor. Near the doorway, carved deep into the wood grain with what looked like a survey chisel, were the words, "We were never alone." That stopped us cold. We spread out, thinking maybe someone had taken off in a panic. It didn't make sense. If it were a bear, we'd see signs. Blood, claw marks, something. But there was nothing, no violence, no struggle. Then Luther called out from the tree line. He'd found footprints, 5 sets, 5 different directions, each one leading away from the cabin. None of them came back. We followed the tracks, not far, just enough to confirm what we already feared. Each trail veered hard, like whoever made them was sprinting blind through snow. One set led toward the ravine, but cut off halfway, vanishing where the ice thinned. Another curved toward the dense pines, twisting unnaturally like the person had been stumbling or turning back and forth. What stuck with me was how quiet it was, like the forest had swallowed whatever happened. No birds, no wind. Just the sound of our boots breaking crusted snow and the distant creak of trees leaning in the cold. We returned to the cabin to regroup. Nate lit the stove. I sat by the map, tracing the red circles with my finger. They were scattered, no clear pattern. One right near the ravine, one not far from the base of a steep bluff, one dead center of the forest. The journal had more pages. I read them slowly. Sometimes I hear my name, but no one's awake. We only hear it when we're apart. Cole saw something between the birches, said it was mirroring him. Mirroring. That word stuck in my brain like a splinter. That night, we stayed in the cabin. None of us said it out loud, but we were afraid to split up. We bolted the door, set watches. Nate stayed up first, then Luther. My turn came at 3 a.m. I sat with my back to the stove, rifle across my lap. The flames cast long shadows across the floorboards. That's when I saw it. A boot print. Fresh, damp, just one. It hadn't been there when I sat down. It pointed inward, toward the stove. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared until my vision blurred. I wanted to wake the others, but something held me still. Like if I acknowledged it, it would finish stepping inside. I sat like that for an hour, maybe longer. By morning, the print had melted. I never said a word. We left the next day, filed our report, classified the case as unresolved. Weather exposure, voluntary disappearance. That's what the forms say, but I know better. I never went back up that trail, but I still think about those 5 red circles, those 5 directions, the footprints that never came home, and the way the journal ended. Just 2 lines scribbled sideways in the margin. Something in the woods knows how to wait. And it doesn't need to follow us back. We're already carrying it.